Hello everyone. So I will just do a little bit of the starting talk, and we'll cover like the first 5 slides, and my colleague will jump in and talk about the rest of the slides. So my name is here. My name is Mengyuan. I'm an assistant professor at the VU Amsterdam, and we fly all the way from the Netherlands to here. So today's topic is about inconsistency between V3.1 and V4, and what can we do about it. I will just save like 30 seconds for my colleague to introduce herself before I start.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Siqi Zhang from VU Amsterdam. This is my second PhD, and I'm supervised by Mengyuan Zhang and VU Research. And our research work is funded by the Dutch Research Council, NWO.
Okay, great. So I think we're here, and this is already the second day of the presentation, and we heard a lot of issues in CVSS. In particular, you can see that we kind of capture 2 blocks talking about this particular issue. 2022, we look at only V3, and we see that Red Hat has low vulnerabilities, and NVD is a bit like inconsistent what is going on with other CNAs. Then we go with bit later, and we see that actually also we can see that VanCheck did another research and saying that CVSS v3 associated with lower scores, or like they have like 20% of the difference with 2 different CNAs or something like this. So here we can see this is not something very real. Inconsistency has been talked and researched, and also in academic works we see like people working on missing information, inconsistencies, and missing different versions and all kinds of problems. So scientifically we would like to see that why? What's the reason behind this kind of inconsistency? And we research in other domains and see that, okay, it mainly caused because human is involved in this rating process. For example, if there's an error created by a human, most likely it's going to happen. Or they're like subjective understandings. People A think it's like this, and people B disagrees, and there's nothing wrong. Most likely both versions could work, but it leads to some kind of discrepancies. Otherwise, we could consider insufficient information. For example, you consider only like a couple words of the description, and then people say, oh, that's not enough for the rating. And we assume this is going to happen. Okay, so if you assume that someone else could assume something else. And we can see there's a real example we captured with the very same description and lead to 3 different values. And if we map to severity level, it gets even worse. Something is critical, high, or medium. Then we talk about the vulnerability management or prioritization is going to lead to completely different result. And this is already our work. We published somewhere here. We can see the footnote here. And we did a little bit of the root cause for this one, and actually because the sequence of the CVE is pretty close by, and we realized maybe during the process people just use the previous description to rate the later. Oh no, actually people put the description corresponding to the CVE but rated it based on the real vulnerability. So when you see it, it's actually the same, but it should be a different vulnerability. But no one knows what happened, but that's for consumers. So when they say it, they only see something like this, okay? So that's pretty bad. And let's say a concrete example here. And there's a description from CV 2023. And then we see that, okay, if I wanted to say here, there's a sentence of execute whenever a user access an injected page. So everyone is familiar with user interaction, right? If I ask you, do you think user interaction is required or not required here? We have required, we have not required, right? So, okay, that's both fine because NVD thinks 99% should be required, and we have other person think completely differently, right? So this is a single sentence written exactly the same, but even in the room, we disagree with each other, right? But that's fine, but that's the real reason behind all those discrepancies. So let's talk about what's going on and what's new here. by speaking what's new, I will just let the new presenter enter, and she will cover the rest of the talk.
Yes, okay. So what's new here? Based on the timeline of CVSS version updates, there have been 5 versions, and CVSSv 4.0 was just released in November 2023. And each new version is generally built upon the previous one, offering more refined and detailed guidance. So this raises a question for our study. How was V3.1 refined into V4? And more importantly, do the vulnerability ratings remain consistent across versions? So first of all, we would like to know if advanced LLMs such as ChatGPT could generate V3.1 and V4 metric vectors consistently. So in step 1, we designed a prompt that listed all metric names for both versions. This is necessary because in the preliminary experiment, we simply asking, please provide us metrics or base metrics for both versions, often lead to irrelevant metric groups, such as environmental metrics or omitted V4 specific metrics. So by listing metric names in the prompt, finally we can get CVS metric vectors in a correct format. And in step 2, we collected CV entries containing both versions that were provided by 2 companies involved in the CVSSic and one from public source cv.org. So you can see here, we listed all combinations of each metric across versions. I will explain it later how and why we combine the metrics like this way. So by comparing the predicted value against our ground truth, the result shows that attack vector and privilege required and impact metrics perform relatively low weighted F1 score. So this may be because inconsistencies exist in the combined metric value across versions. Let's look at an example of how may this inconsistency produced by ChatGPT. So this is an example we already discussed in previous slides. As NVD and CNA do not agree with each other, so we are curious about how ChatGPT would read this value. The result shows that both versions rated user interaction as required. So, however, we noticed here the scope in V3, the scope has considered as changed, but in V4, which means the impact extends beyond the vulnerable components. So there should have some subsequent impacts, but ChatGPT has considered V4 as no any impact matrix value. So here, what can we do? So far, CVSSv 3.1 is still the primary scoring versions used by most organizations, while V4 remains in its early adoption phase. Some vendors, such as FontDB, has started providing CVS version 4 ratings, usually alongside V3.1. And in most cases, one version comes up first and then followed by another version, maybe rated after some time, which may lead inconsistencies between 2 versions. So for example, this is a CV entry rated by 1DB. So you can see they have rated version 3.1 as user interaction required, but V4 is no user interaction required, which is inconsistent. So, so to avoid this kind of issue, we're proposing using consistency rules and rating both versions at the same time. For example, if you first rate V3.1 and consider it is required, then you should consider V4 is passive or active. if you read V4 first, for example, you consider is not user interaction required, then you should also read V3.1 as not required. So in this way, you will save time and avoid inconsistency later on. And if there is a version already available, you can also read another version, but but if you can use in our rules, you can you can quickly spot any inconsistencies, and you can correct it if necessary. Okay, so let's start to introduce our knowledge-based consistent rules. By reviewing the first official documentation, we defined 3 types of mapping relationship between V3.1 and V4 metrics. The first one is one-to-one mapping. It's quite straightforward. So if the definition of a metric and the metric value do not change between versions, so the evaluation should remain the same across versions. So here we have AV and PR fall into this category, as them do not have changed during the version updates. And the second mapping is one-to-many. So here we have user interaction and attack complexity fall into this category. For example, when you read a vulnerability at the same time for both versions, you consider there is no user interaction required, so you just simply give the value not required for both versions. And if you think it's required, you assign required in V3.1, and you should assign passive or active in V4. And for attack complexity, so first we look at low complexity in V3.1. So it can be directly mapped to low in V4 with attack requirements needed or not needed. It depends on whether pre-request conditions are involved. And similar for high attack complexity, you can directly map to high with or without attack requirements. And there is a special case for high complexity in V3. And maybe this also is the reason why they have changed the attack complexity from V3 to V4, like split AC to AC and AT in V4. So this is because the high value in the high value of AC in V3.1 do not reflect the significant difference between conditions currently compressed in the definition of high complexity. So V4 aims to address this issue by splitting AC into AC and AT in V4. For example, the rest condition, the attack itself is not technically complex, but it relies on specific external conditions. So in this vulnerability, the AC has been assigned high in V3.1, then it downgraded to low in V4 with present of attack requirements. So here we have a high mapped to low and present of AT. So in total, we have 5 consistent combinations for attack complexity. The third one is many-to-many. So here, as the scope property in V3.1 has been removed in V4, so its concept has separating into the vulnerable system impact and the subsequent system impact. So here we consider impact value assigned into these 2 systems depend on the value assigned to scope metric in V3.1. Here I will first talk about the scope is unchanged. It's quite simple because there should be the impact effect with no constraint consequences. So like all metrics should be fully applied to vulnerable system with no impact on the subsequent system. For example, you have high, low, low assigned to V3.1, then you also should have high, low, low assigned to vulnerable system with no impact in the subsequent system. You can also see the expression below, like unchanged with unchanged scope, vulnerable system equal to CIA with no impact on the subsequent system. So yes, the scope is changed, is more complicated. So after our study in the datasets we defined the 4 cases. I will introduce one by one with an example, and its expression will list below. The first one, when the scope is changed, the CIA could be fully transferred to both systems. So here, if you have high, high, low, then you will also have high, high, low in vulnerable and subsequent system. The second one, the vulnerable system could be fully impacted, and the subsequent system experience some level of impact. So here, if you have high, high, none here, you will also have high, high, none in vulnerable system, and different value assigned to subsequent system. But it cannot equal to the vulnerable or the CIA. Otherwise, it's the same as the first rule. And the third one is the subsequent system should be fully impacted. Well, the vulnerable system may only experience partial or no impact. So here, if you have high, high, none here, it could be fully transferred to subsequent system and no impact on the vulnerable system, or maybe some level of impact on the vulnerable system. And last one, CI impact distribute the impact between vulnerable system and subsequent system, which each impact value transferred to one system with another one has no impact. So if you have like low confidentiality and high integrate, it has been transferred to, it considered as subsequent system, then you have no impact on the vulnerable system. And also if you have low availability, it has been considered as vulnerable system, so there will be no value in the subsequent system. So let's see how our rule could help the real world dataset. So we have 2 public data sets that collected, one from cv.org from last year, and one is from VanCheck this year, and all rated by 1 GB. Overall, we have over 2,000 CVEs. So by applying our rules, the result is the result is quite good, as almost all metrics remain consistent across versions, except UI. So the UI shows relatively high inconsistency, 22.1% of CV entries that were rated as required in V3.1, but as none in V4. So this means errors may produce in one of these 2 versions. So analysts could simply discuss and modify one of them to keep consistency across versions. Yeah, we also examined the private dataset obtained from the CVSSs, which was collected last year and contains over 6,000 CVEs. The result shows that even for straightforward mapping metrics like AV and PR, there still have some inconsistencies. And for UI, 3 inconsistent combinations together account for 3.1 of the entries, which is relatively high. So we have reported back to company B, ask why this happened. So they are very interested in reviewing the affected CVEs and may apply the correction if necessary. And same as the impact, you can see the company A also have very high inconsistent metrics related to impact, 26.7%. So we also reported back to company A. They share the internal agreement. So, but however, even if we apply this hidden agreement rules, they still have 3.3% of entries exhibit inconsistencies related to impact. Yeah, conclusion. So CVSSv3 is still in its early adoption phase. So due to limited data available, our analysis is based on what we collected. So we're also looking for more data to support our study and help improve our rules. We would appreciate if you have any CVSSv4 data that could be shared with us. And also, even if some companies apply hidden agreement rules, integrating them with our consistency rules can still help detect inconsistent entries. And last, we have an open question. After applying our rules to ensure the consistent ratings across versions, we still observe some severity level shifts between two versions. So this raises the following question. So which, for some users use both v3.1 and v4, so which version should then trusted for patching or prioritization when both are available? And a second, that the formula used to calculate v4 severity level still have room to improvement. For example, if you can make two versions in the same ballpark or reduce some level shifts. Yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
So I understand there are new vectors involved in 4.0 compared to 3.1. Yes. Did any of your analysis and your research show why you were getting different results on the same vector? I know in the beginning you had somewhere it was no versus R. Like it was different 3.1 versus 4.0 for the same factor on the same CVE. Because that's probably one of the concerning things, because we don't always know why they were ranked that way for the same vector.
This one or?
No, go forward. I think it was forward to. No, forward. Next.
Next?
Yeah. Yep. Keep going. That one. So in that case, was that the same one? Because if you're getting different results from the same factor in 3.1 versus 4.0, or did I misunderstand that? Because we should be consistent regardless of which version of CVSS we're using, right?
Yes.
Again, that's why I'm asking. So I do understand that in 4.0 you'll have three more factors that might be a little weird and adds up to go up. So it should be relatively consistent for the similar factors that apply in 3.1 and 4.0, correct?
Well, I mean, this is the wish, right? We do say that even for those very straightforward ones, for example, the concept does not even change. Even for the private companies, still have like 0.6 of the discrepancy between two versions. We just did the data analysis. We don't really know why it happened like this, but we guess like most likely this happened in a very different time frame. People A rated like 6 months ago, and then people B came in and rated the same thing like, 6 months after. So then we wish. This is why we say that, okay, use this rule. If you rated as a network 6 months ago, please also rate network at least 6 months after. And if you want to change it both. So this is why we put this rule in place.
Okay, thank you.
So there are many new CVEs for 2025 with 4.0 scores. So we like to see the analysis on those CVEs. I think you did some good analysis, but those are pretty old. Old CVEs, like in the first half of 2024. So we want to see more data, more CVEs analysis.
Great. If you can connect us with more data, we will be very happy to do more analysis. She actually did more work also recently, but she didn't put all the results here because for the completeness of the presentation, but it is an ongoing work and we will be very happy to receive more data.
So have you looked at the GitHub data?
I think she did GitHub data. She did Van check lately, and I think that was like 2,000 at beginning for the public data set. I think now she has 9,000 or something, if I remember correctly.
There's about, oh, there's almost 10,000 in GitHub.
Okay, so what?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What great news then.
Yeah, great news.
So let's talk after, because I would love to compare what I've done and what you've done, because this is super interesting and you've gone very deep on how those individual metrics affect the overall score and the uncertainty. So this is really interesting. And I love just the actionable, knowing how it affects it and the uncertainty, how you can develop a system to compensate for it. So that's, yeah. But look at GitHub advisories. There's a wealth of data. They're the largest data source that I've looked at. Both are reviewed and unreviewed, and 3.1 and 4.0 scores.
Yeah, thank you.
Comment just from the GitHub Intel. It may be as part of the CVE data that you're looking at, but Intel, Siemens, are all producing both 3.1 and 4.0. So those are other potential sources, and there was a comment about that.
Hey, then you can connect us through my website, or you can scan her. That's her LinkedIn, and then we can just get connected. And otherwise, send us emails. I always check my reply. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.